The book of Leviticus in the Old Testament has a sort of reputation for being not the most scintillating reading for many contemporary readers. But even so, even for one who's not interested that much, something fascinating can sneak up on you. Like, for example, in Leviticus chapter 16, various kinds of cleansings and impurities and rituals have been described up to this point. But now we're going to reach a very serious ritual in the book of Leviticus, a kind of ritual that could even be done just once a year in order to purge what is at this stage in the narrative, the tabernacle, and then later these will be transferred to Israel's temple, a more permanent setting. Purge it of sin. You got to purge all kinds of sins, as you find out in Leviticus, and something for Christian readers certainly that can be a direct devotional takeaway, we might say, from the book of Leviticus is this idea that God treats sin very seriously. And sin is something that has to be dealt with. Has to be dealt with somehow. It's not just just forgive and forget, magical things, whatever, right? In the Christian tradition, sin has to be dealt with too, and not merely by acknowledging a once for all time sacrifice of Jesus on the cross, although this is central to our theology too. But, read the rest of the New Testament, right? There has to be confession and reconciliation between people and all kinds of things, right? But this idea that sin is serious and has to be dealt with, something that absolutely has a strong footing in the Hebrew Bible in the Old Testament. And certainly here in Leviticus chapter 16, where we have Aaron here, the brother of Moses. We learn that he is not only making this atonement at this grand moment, which in later Jewish tradition comes to be called Yom Kippur, the day of purgation. Sometimes people call it the Day of Atonement. It's not really a direct translation of Yom HaKippurim, the day of cleansing, right? And on this day of purgation, getting it out, a fascinating thing happens. This is verse 6. Verse 7. Aaron will take the 2 goats and set them before the Lord at the entrance of the tent of meeting. And Aaron shall cast lots on the 2 goats. One lot for the Lord, and the other lot, in Hebrew, Azazel, for Azazel. Okay. 2 goats. We don't know which one's going to be for which. We're going to cast lots by chance. One thinks maybe more than chance. Maybe it's divinely directed, or maybe it really is just chance. Maybe it doesn't matter which goat is which. One of these is going to be for the Lord, Adonai, Yahweh, in the text. That one will get killed in the sacrifice. So verse 15, he shall slaughter the goat of the sin offering, that is for the people, and bring its blood inside the curtain, and do with its blood as he did. So you have to get the blood inside there, in a very holy place, sprinkling it on the mercy seat. Thus he shall make atonement for the sanctuary because of the uncleanness. Okay. So blood is being sprinkled and so on. Then we have the live goat. This goat, which is for Azazel. Now, the NRSV Bible, which I'm looking at here, translates Azazel with a capital A, Azazel, as a proper name. Other translations had translated this as scapegoat. Now, this is just genuinely a translation confusion here. Like, how do we translate this word, Azazel? The most common translation that scholars have given is that Azazel is made up of 2 words, Azaz, which means to be strong or fierce or something like that, and El or El, which means God. Thus, you would get the word fierce God, strong God, frightening God. Who is this God? I mean, is it not the Lord? How many gods are there? Well, by putting a capital A there as the translation Azazel, and with this parallelism between La Adonai, for the Lord, La Azazel, for Azazel, one maybe gets the impression that this is some kind of rival, or dare one even say it, demonic force, to which some kind of, I don't know if it's really an offering, but some kind of gesture must be made in the text. The translation scapegoat comes from this as well, and from some early Greek and Latin translations, who saw this term Azazel as meaning something more like the goat that goes away. So there are 2 words here that maybe sound like goat and going away, and maybe that's where the etymology could be. And that might be the etymology. It's not the one that scholars prefer for linguistic reasons and for reasons of context and so on in this passage, but maybe. But this is where we get the idea of a scapegoat, the goat that goes away. And the goat really does go away. I mean, this is what we see in the ritual, picking it back up at verse 20. When he, Aaron, has finished atoning for the holy place and the tent of meeting and the altar, he shall present the live goat. So we still have sin. We still have problems here. We still have some things that now need to be chased out of the sanctuary. The first goat is purging the Holy of Holies, but now you have blood in there too, and so there's something else that has to be done to complete this process. At least that's the impression I'm getting from reading this. The study of books like Leviticus and Numbers is like a whole academic specialty in and of itself, not my academic specialty within the Hebrew Bible. And as you can see, I think if you read this, it is enormously complicated, right? So I come into this as a learner and a traveler, just like anyone else. So the first goat for the Lord, slaughtered, blood goes in the Holy of Holies. But this second one, it's as though something has not yet been done, something additional for Azazel. Verse 20, when Aaron has finished atoning for the holy place and the tent of meeting and the altar, he shall present the live goat. Then Aaron shall lay both his hands on the head of the live goat and confess over it all the iniquities of the people of Israel. It's almost as though the ritual reaches some kind of apex, where now it's not just about the priest, bearing the people's sins, which is something that the priest does through sacrifice and through these rituals. But it's now this is everybody, the entire community. The hands of the priest go on the goat, and it's as though somehow the priest is taking on all of these problems and then putting it on this goat's head. Both hands on the head of the live goat, and confess over it all the iniquities of the people of Israel and all their transgressions, all their sins, putting them on the head of the goat and sending it away into the wilderness by means of someone designated for the task. Well, that's fascinating. The goat shall bear on itself all their iniquities to a barren region, and the goat shall be set free in the wilderness. To wander about, to die, to be eaten or sacrificed to this Azazel figure from earlier in the chapter? Not really clear. One text that we might bring in as a parallel here for thinking about this imagery of the wilderness and the goat and this idea of some kind of eerie, spooky, bizarro force out in the wilderness is Isaiah chapter 34. In Isaiah 34, we have an oracle from a prophet against a nation called Edom, which is next door to Israel, but in the desert region, in this arid, barren, high desert, rocky, inhospitable place. Isaiah 34:8 begins, "For the Lord has a day of vengeance, a year of vindication by Zion's cause, and the streams of Edom shall be turned into pitch, and her soil into sulfur. Her land shall become burning pitch. Night and day shall not be quenched." I mean, this imagery is terrifying. Skipping down to verse 11. "But the hawk and the hedgehog shall possess it. The owl and the raven shall live in it." These are desert animals, right? "He shall stretch the line of confusion over it, and the plummet of chaos over its nobles." The words there for confusion and chaos are really fascinating. It's a callback to Genesis chapter 1, to words that describe formlessness and void. Tohu vavohu in Hebrew. Words not used very often, but describing some kind of formless, trackless desert. Confusion and chaos. "They shall name it no kingdom there, and all its princes shall be nothing." You have thorns growing, but really what I was building toward here was verse 14. "Wildcats shall meet with hyenas. Goat demons shall call to each other. There too Lilith shall repose and find a place to rest." The word for goat demons there, unclear translation. I'm reading the NRSV. They translate it as goat demons. The word in Hebrew seems to mean something like goat or goat hair or something like that. What kind of goats actually live in this kind of wilderness? Maybe they're making a bit of an interpretation here, seeing this as something beyond just a natural goat, but some kind of spiritualized demon. And then you have this word Lilith, or Lilith, which in Jewish folklore, the idea of Lilith is that Lilith was Adam's kind of original wife, or hidden wife or something like this, and she's kind of like this demonic character and so on. This is not a part of any canonical scripture, not an expert on Lilith. But indeed, the book of a book like Enoch, which was written probably after most of the, or all or most of the Old Testament was written, takes up this mythology of characters like Azazel and Lilith and these goat demons and all kinds of demonic figures, and sort of weaves a story together as a kind of like fan fiction almost on some of the strangest moments in Genesis and in some of these other passages, right? Anyway, I'm bringing up Isaiah 34 here by way of saying that Leviticus is not the only chapter or portion that talks about the wilderness being associated with strange creatures and so on. But it all takes us back to Leviticus, back to this ritual. I mean, what's happening here? Are we supposed to think, honestly, that the text is telling us that there's some kind of demon figure named Strong God or Azazel to whom a goat needs to be offered as some kind of presentation? I mean, that's what it sounds like it's saying. Yes, it sounds like it's saying something like that. I don't deny that one could look around on the internet and find all kinds of elaborate attempts by Christians to say that Azazel is Satan or something like that, and this somehow embodies a kind of primal good and evil battle between the goats. I mean, in a sense, I just don't know what to make of readings like that. The most obvious Christian interpretations, I think, on the biggest level would involve the idea of seeing the seriousness with which sin is treated, and maybe the acknowledgement that there's some horrible force out there in the world, like this Azazel. On a more specific level, Christians might think of Jesus, of course, and the doctrine of the atonement, the idea that Jesus is killed as a kind of a sacrifice. You get a kind of mixing, though, of the animals. It's not really a one-to-one. It's not as though this Day of Atonement or really Day of Purgation, as I said, ritual really corresponds as a one-to-one. You also have the Passover ritual, which is really about the sheep without blemish. So like, is Jesus the sheep or the goat? Like, he can't be the sheep and the goat if you're to make it like correspond exactly to biblical ritual law and the animals. But you at least have the idea here that somehow people's sins are being taken from one place, almost like they're a physical item. And that's really how the book of Leviticus treats all of these categories of sin, of impurity being different from sin in the book of Leviticus, not just to be merely conflated with it. And these issues are maybe put physically onto an animal, and that animal is sent away. So you have my point is, in this rambling video here, my point is you have different ways of thinking about sin, and you have different ways in the Christian appropriation of this material and its adoption, in its interpretation, in its reinterpretation, different ways of thinking about who Jesus is in terms of the sacrificial animal system. Technically speaking, he can't be the sheep and the goat here. He can't just be like all the animals if you're to try to make a one-to-one correspondence, right? But this ritual is so fascinating, so very strange. I guess at this point in the narrative, it gives Israel a sense that there is truly something serious going on in the wilderness, and that just in this little bubble that they're in around the tabernacle, they're being protected from forces that could well destroy them.